Okay. So, let's first start off by stating the obvious, something that Fujifilm itself would certainly so admit, is that it does not have the super hardcore glass of Nikon or Canon for sports, action, and wildlife. Okay, I mean it does have some, and it is coming out with a 200mm f2. I mean it's going to be huge and of course very expensive. Very expensive. They have the 100 to 400 and they have plenty of lenses that'll handle most sports action. Especially, we don't have the 300mm 2.8, which would be the 200mm f2. But outside of that given fact, if we actually examine what Nikon actually does have, I'm not going to look at Canon. Canon has been sitting on their feet. Right now I know they're working on a full-frame mirrorless. Nikon's working on a full-frame mirrorless. Nikon really only has a few cameras. Their Nikon D5 is an abysmal failure. It's a $6,500 turd muffin. It has an anti-aliasing filter of all things. There's a reason why it's a 20 megapixel full-frame sensor. Is that so it can have huge eyeballs on it for incredible high ISO low light performance. Well, it does do that. However, it feels like a plastic chew toy, and there's nothing within the D500 that makes it desirable. I mean, it has horrible video. The D5 is not made for video. In addition to the fact that Nikon makes no bones about the fact, even though they've introduced more video features into the D850, everybody will tell you that the D850, you know, is a sleazy loser when it comes to, you know, serious video as compared to the XH1 or the Panasonic. Well, any of the Panasonics, and certainly so Sony. And Nikon doesn't make any bones about that. I mean, they themselves, right here, it says, we're a photographic company. When Nikon says they're a photographic company, that's exactly what they mean. Nikon would actually, if they had their druthers and were hooked up to a truth serum, or actually injected with some truth serum, they would like to give everybody the middle finger when it comes to video. It's like, hey, we're a photographic company. You know, sick of this video. Stuff, you know, if you want that, then go buy a professional. Go buy a Red. Go buy a Red Dragon camera. You know, got plenty of money, go make a professional video. I mean, that really is the fact. I mean, I've actually talked to a couple Nikon people that have basically said that, but I mean, I knew that before I even said that. Everybody else knows that as well. So what does Nikon actually have? They have the Nikon D850. Great. 46 megapixels are wonderful. The Nikon D500 is killer. Call it a legendary camera. I mean, it's just about perfect for everything, except for architecture, portraiture, and landscape, because it's a crop sensor camera. Not that there's any deficiency there, but I mean, that's what it is. So Nikon has the Nikon D850, the Nikon D500. What else do they really have? And the D750 has had 4 recalls now. It has really wonderful output. It's long in the tooth, it's slow. I mean, I won't even discuss the D750 anymore. I mean, it's just such a miserable, sleazy camera. Now, you can lump all the little dinky cameras that Nikon has, or 3000 and 5000 series, into the cheap dinkies, right? They're one camera, even though they're more than one camera. Okay, just a cheap-ass camera Nikon there. You know, want to get someone to Nikon, have them buy that cheap crap. Wonderful. Not saying it doesn't make wonderful images, but what does Nikon really have? What does not mean? I know they're working on their full-frame mirrorless. We know they have the huge-ass glass for hardcore sports action and wildlife. There's no denying that. So does Canon. But ultimately, what does Nikon have? They've got 3 cameras. They got their dinkies to get someone to suck someone into Nikon. The D4 isn't made anymore. Someone's going to bring up, well, what about the D3, D4? Those cameras aren't even made anymore. The DF, everybody had a lot of high hopes for the DF. The DF went over like a lead balloon, and there's 1,000 reasons why. That camera's still being made for how much longer? Who the hell knows? So really, Nikon's only got 3 cameras. The D850, the D500, whatever little freaking dinky-ass piece of junk you can go pick up at Walmart. You see the dinky Nikons at Walmart or like Costco. Buy a dinky with a cheap plastic crap kit lens in it. So that's what Nikon's got. Specifically, outside of the hardcore sports action and wildlife, Fujifilm, if you followed me so far, Fujifilm is actually a more diversified company in their offerings, even though they don't have a full-frame camera, than Nikon is. They have the GFX medium format, which Nikon, Canon, and Sony doesn't have a damn medium format. They're about to come out with a cheap medium format that is just going to melt the crotch of everybody. It's like, damn, I want a medium format camera, but that GFX costs a lot of money. The XH1 has been absolutely, people think, well, you're just a Fuji fanboy, you're just talking out of your ass, a bunch of fanboy talk. No, the XH1 is incredible. Everybody I told about how incredibly silent the shutter is, wonderful. My God, I love this camera. I love the XT2. XT2 is really my favorite camera of all time. I'd pack that camera everywhere with me. Still have two XT2s. It's not a replacement, one for the other, the XH1 and the XT2. I said last year that the best cheap camera to get so someone doesn't have a decent camera at all would be the XT20. My God, that camera is incredible. And the XT20 is about to get a huge-ass firmware update that's going to make it radically better than it already frigging is. Honestly speaking, no fanboy talk aside, if you ignore, you know, the huge-ass glass, we know Nikon and Canon has that. Realistically, so far as the, you know, the shooters out there, you know, the guys that aren't shooting the Olympics and, you know, shooting grizzly bears, you know, while they got their crotch in the mud at 800 yards with their 600 millimeter f4s, which I have that lens now, you know, that lens is, you know, other than that stuff, which is like, what, 0.5% of photographers, well, so let's just say it's 1% of photographers. Fujifilm is a more diversified photographic company than Nikon is. We all know how much Nikon glass, I mean, how much glass Nikon's got. We all know Fujifilm doesn't have that. I mean, I've got more Nikon lenses than anybody. I know about that. I know that's, you know, staring in my face when I look at dozens and dozens of Pelican cases full of Nikon lenses. Don't tell me about that. But for all practical purposes, Fujifilm is a more well-rounded and more diversified camera company than Nikon and Canon is. And by the way, Sony, for Christ's sakes, this is what I want to know about Sony. Why does every camera, someone was telling me this the other day, of course I've always thought, why the hell does every damn Sony camera have to have the same things? An A7, A7R3, A7R2, A7, can you drop the A7 crap? Maybe just, maybe, I don't know, what do you want to call it? Does every camera have to be named the same? Here's, that always miffed me. Even the Sony people get confused. They said, did you mean A7R2 or the A7 II? Did you mean the A7R3 or the A7 III? Can you change the names of your damn cameras? You know, there's more, I think there's 25 letters left in the English alphabet there. Since you're using Greek for alpha, maybe you could call it the Sony Delta 5 or something like that, or maybe the Epsilon 6 or the Phi 2. A lot of letters left in the Greek alphabet too. Everything's going to be an alpha because alpha is number one. It's the best, right? Actually, I think that Fujifilm alpha is always the first. Like when you make something, and this is pretty damn funny. When you make something, the first thing is always the shittiest. So, what should be alpha, right? So, all of Sony stuff's called the alpha. Fuji should come out with their next camera model. They should call it the Omega. Because the last is always the best of something. Like when you have something like the last iteration, kind of like the iPad 2 was a lot better than the iPad 1, you know. Yeah, the Fuji's next camera, Sony's got the Alpha, which is the first. Yeah, Fuji's next camera should be called the Omega, because the last is always the best. Just thinking out loud there. But yeah, realistically, outside of the 1%er for the hardcore sports action wildlife, Fujifilm, realistically, you know, being completely objective, Fujifilm is a more diversified company in their attack strategy to photographers collectively than is Nikon or Canon. And considering how much bigger Nikon is than Fujifilm, that's actually saying a lot. In other words, Fujifilm went a lot farther in a shorter period of time than Nikon has over the past 100 years. And as far as the group collective of photographers that, you know, that's kind of startling, because even Fujifilm, they will tell you, and they've even said out loud to me, like, Fujifilm's not that big of a company. They're going to have the 100 megapixel GFX. They're going to come out with a really cheap rangefinder, a fat X Pro 2 looking camera with the medium format 50 megapixel in there. They have their XT20. They have what they call, and I agree with them, their flagship camera. I love the piss out of this camera. I'm not just saying that. I love the hell out of the XH1. I really do. I think if you haven't had your hands on one, you should rent one, borrow one, you know. Buy somebody a pack of cigarettes or something and ask them to use their camera for an hour. Nobody smokes anymore. I don't smoke. You should borrow the XH1. I love this camera. It really is. I mean, I know it's bigger and fatter, but I mean, it really is like the XT2 on steroids. It is. DSLR owners would find a lot of sympathy in switching to it. At the very least, try it out for a couple days. Fujifilm does have a rental department, by the way, where you can rent lenses and cameras. So, anyway, that's my spiel on Fuji. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you like these videos. Have a lovely weekend. All that good stuff. Pop the bottle on something cold, kick your feet up, and watch a horror flick or whatever floats your boat. Thank you so much. I think I'm going to go watch a rerun of something. No, I'm going to go study, actually. I feel slightly worn down. I've done too much. When I think too much and write too much, my brain turns to jello. I need to recharge my batteries. Why am I saying this? I'm going to edit this out later. I'm definitely going to edit this out later. This is not going to make it to this video. I'm going to make certain of that.